So the question is, what do we say to our loved ones when we come out to them as queer and they reject us? And what should we be saying to ourselves when we are faced with this kind of rejection? Well, firstly, we must understand that if it took us years or even decades to understand and accept ourselves, it will take some time for our loved ones to accept and understand us. And sometimes they do not have the intellectual capacity, the emotional, or even the spiritual capacity to accept something that has for years been considered a major sin and a dishonor to the family. And so the stark reality is that some of your loved ones may never come to accept you. And this is something that you will just have to make peace with. That no matter how much we love and care, some people just don't have the capacity to love back. In my personal experience in counseling with queer Muslims and with their families, I have found that the primary concern for parents has always been that my child might be influenced by either westernization, possessed by a jinn, or even molested, right? Those are the common ones. And the idea that my child was probably struggling with self acceptance and loss of identity and confusion is something that doesn't come to the mind if it comes at all. So, before we even attempt to have that conversation with our loved ones, we must first make peace with ourselves and we must accept the orientation. If you are not convinced about who you are, others won't either. And the more self actualized we are, the easier it becomes for us to have that difficult conversation. So, if your parents are fairly religious, they may have this concern that you're losing your Muslim identity. And so you need to show them that nothing has changed now that you have revealed that you are queer. Because the mere fact that they now know, about you, that doesn't make you any less of a Muslim than the way they've known you before you have revealed this. And so you need to be then sure that your attachment to Islam is meaningful, you are attaching and you are committed to the values of Islam and those practices within Islam that enhances those values. And if your family sees that, it will help them to decrease this anxiety about you losing your Islamic identity. And sometimes your family needs time to process the shock. And in most cases, families, they do come around and they accept their children because they love them. And but it may take time. But with your sincerity and dedication to maintain family ties, they will eventually come to accept, inshallah. And you don't have to go into religious debates with your families. You may not have enough knowledge to sustain a theological argument, so don't go there. Your job is also not to convince them, right, about your sexual orientation. Your job is just to be authentic with them. And I tell you, authenticity is contagious. It will force them to authentically engage with the issues and to address their fears, right? If your family understands that this has been a struggle for you, and that if you have had the opportunity to choose differently, you would have done that, right? If they understand how difficult it was for you, they'll probably soften up. So remember that you are not responsible for the way your family processes information or the emotional outbursts, because you've done nothing wrong, right? And also, don't try to hide who you are by not wanting to hurt your families. Being authentic might hurt, but the authenticity will force your family into stretching the ability to accept difference, and to overcome their fears, and to broaden their knowledge about human diversity, right? This is what is required within spiritual growth. And sometimes Allah blesses families with gay children to help them to overcome judgments of others. Sometimes I look at the family in the counseling room, and I go, I'm like, I can understand why Allah has you know challenged you with a gay child in your family. So don't hide who you are, thinking that if you're going to reveal yourself, you're going to hurt them. You will just rob them from that opportunity to grow, and that's even far worse. So what do we say to our in response to what do we say to ourselves in response to what our families say to us? Well, there's a few pointers that I could mention that might help. You should never make those negative messages that comes from society about who you are or who you should be more important than that voice inside of you that is constantly telling you that you have done nothing wrong and that you haven't chosen to be this way. A man cannot dictate the morality of a woman. She knows better how to behave in society. She knows better the needs of women, right? Similarly, a straight person cannot dictate to a gay person how they should live as gay and Muslim. You are the authority on the subject, and they should be listening to your narratives as a queer Muslim and your needs. And as I said previously, being completely comfortable with who you are as a queer person and as Muslim, it makes it easier to dismiss those negative messages from society and that negative self-talk, right? That internalized homophobia. You should never try to convince people that you are right. Straight people don't go around, convincing people that heterosexuality is permissible. So, and if you're still, trying to convince others about who you are and that you're right, you should maybe question whether you have completely made peace with your sexual orientation or gender identity. I've seen too many queer Muslims negotiating the dilemma between their faith and their sexual orientation with, you know, drug and alcohol abuse, irresponsible sexual behavior, and also disengaging from their faith. Now, you must remember that Islam is not homophobic. People who interpret Islam through the lens of patriarchy become homophobic. So engage with Islam through its values and adhere to those rituals and practices that have meaning for you. And don't be afraid to question Islam. By that I mean asking critical questions, just as the Quran instructs us to do. أَفَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُونَ, don't you contemplate? أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, don't you observe? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, don't you use your brain? أَفَلَا تَتَدَبَّرُونَ, don't you reflect? And so on. Queer people who are self-actualized, they have responsible sex and they make healthy sex partner choices because they honor their bodies and they have enough self-love. Some queer people may engage in sex just to fill that void and to get the quick fix to the love that they're looking for. That love should come from within. And once you have that self-love, your intimate partner relationships become more meaningful. So attach yourself to the positive aspects of Islam. So instead of focusing on, condemnation and hell and punishment, focus on the indiscriminate compassion of Allah. Focus on Allah being the ever ready to forgive our mistakes. Ummatun muznibatun rabbul ghafur. We are a sinful ummah, but we are forgiving God. If you are constantly authentic with yourself and in your actions or interactions with people, you will find that Allah will always be there to guide you whenever you need that guidance.